Hi, hello, can everyone hear me? Hello, everyone hear me? Great, amazing. So yeah, sorry, that's a mouthful, but I thought it might be too late to change my submission name. So hi, I'm Lucy. I'm the Public Engagement with Science Manager at ZSL, and I'm going to be talking about how to do the project that I did. So that project is Refugia. So it's a collaboration between ZSL and the new Art Studio. So ZSL is a wildlife conservation charity. It has three main arms to it. The first is we run two zoos, London Zoo and Whipsnade Zoo. The second is we do global wildlife science conservation, and the third one is putting that science into practice in global conservation programs. And then we did a collaboration with the new Art Studio, which is a therapeutic arts group for asylum seekers and refugees. So a question that I get asked a lot is how did this collaboration start between the two of us? So when I first joined ZSL, which was a year ago, I shared the opportunity to come to the zoo and see what we've got going on with a community garden that I volunteer on. And someone on the email chain replied saying it'd be really great if my arts group could come and visit and we could see animals from home. I was like, that sounds great, but I have just started a new job and I didn't have the time to completely follow that up. But then a grant came up from NERC around engaging with environmental science. I was like, wonder what Dave's art group is. So Dave put me in touch with the directors of the charity, and they were like, we're not quite an arts group, we're a therapeutic practicing arts group for asylum seekers and refugees. And I was like, well, that would be amazing if we could collaborate. And I start to explain what an idea of the project could be. And they kind of were a bit reticent. I'm not sure what asylum seekers have got to do with wildlife conservation. But then as I started to explain, they kind of reflected and were like, well, actually, a lot of the members, that's what they refer as new Art Studio members, paint landscapes, birds, animals as metaphors. So actually have a much closer relationship to nature than we'd originally kind of thought when we had that first discussion. Actually, it might be something they'd really enjoy. So we put the grant application together and started to develop it together and got the funding. And I'm going to tell you about what the project was and how we've used our natural science collections in that. And at the same time, try and tell you a bit about if you were thinking about doing something similar, what you could be thinking about. So the first thing is that I do public engagement. So people have mentioned public engagement before. I'm going to just, the definition is from the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement. Their definition is that it's a two-way communication, any event, anything that creates mutual benefit. And it's generally people in academia or with research, and then other communities or members of the public. And that is the public being people who either are not heavily science engaged or science professionals. Generally, that's who my audience I would consider as, and people who specifically experience barriers, and I look at how we can remove them. And so what is public engagement when I'm planning? And so we did co-production, which is doing and planning with the group. And so this is a little bit of theory of Sherry Arnstein's engagement ladder. On one side, you've got inform, which is like, here's the program, let's do it, but we've designed it. All the way up to the other end, which is empower, which is like, let's do it together, you plan it, we'll kind of give you the skills and tools to do it, but you run with it. And so that's the gold standard that we were aiming for, which is right at the other end of the ladder. So the first thing that I do whenever I'm working with any group in co-production is just work out what their needs are and how we can embed it in the project. And so we mapped out what our aims were. Theirs were to develop new creative techniques and to feel more grounded in the UK, maybe with a greater sense of community. Our aims as our funder were to engage in environmental science, and we can share skills and mutual benefit. That's what we were interested in. So this is kind of a visual version of what I expected when we applied for the grant it would look like. So we've got 5 sessions. The yellow triangles are just planning, so big upfront planning of co-production, and then checking in regularly after each session to tailor and make sure that it went okay, how can we do it better, and then at the end is a co-produced celebration event. So we didn't really know how the members would want to celebrate, we didn't know how staff would like to celebrate. They might, if they've been exploring quite intense topics, maybe they might just want to share with the people that they've been doing the project with, or they might want to do a big public exhibition. We didn't know, so it was just a co-produced celebration event. And so this doesn't actually reflect time. I thought whilst I was making this, I was like, maybe I'll show what it looked like. Oh no, I'll show you in a minute. So across the programme, we used our biological archive collections, our library, ZSL's library archive collections, and our science to bring together lots of different examples of our science. So we'd be using specimens where we're talking about life in water while people are drawing them, and then they're listening to researchers talk about their work to try and bring all senses and creative inspiration when looking at the topic. When we were doing budget, sorry, this is still on what we submitted in the grant. Budget is that we put in for translators, for creative tools, resources, and time for those who we could and should be rewarding, benefiting, which were the directors. They worked for 1 day a week for the charity, so any time that we would be doing planning, that's outside of their normal working hours for the charity, so we wanted to pay them accordingly. So this is what it ended up being like. And so at the beginning, heavy co-production, lots of talking. Then as the sessions progressed, little less need to check in, and we started to develop what those projects and programs could look like. And then towards the end, turns out they really would like a really big public exhibition. So who am I to say no to people who want a big public exhibition? So with the help of lots of very lovely people at ZSL, it tumbled into a very big exhibition, which I'll be sharing with you. And there was one more thing I wanted to flag. I can't remember now. Timing, checking in. But then by the end, in the last 3 sessions, that's when the members started to really understand when they came to us what they'd be doing and what we'd be doing and how it properly worked. And then they could start to share their work and practices with us. It became a real mutual exchange by session 3, 4, and 5, which I'm excited to share with you. So how did we start it? I made a visual document of all of the research that we do, and then all of the different types of creative practices I could think of, and that was the starting point for us to explore what that programme of creative topics could look like. So in each one, the aim was to maybe do a different creative technique and a different scientific focus of some kind. And so I think that didn't actually work as well as I think it was. I think they just looked at all the pictures and just like, yeah, that all looks great. And I was like, any particular theme, any focus? And the language barrier, and I think possibly overwhelming choice, as we heard back from the directors, is sometimes for people who have constrained choices, then being given a ton of choice, was a bit intimidating. But then I was planning on doing like a kind of brand graphics for it. And so I also simultaneously asked for images that reminded them of home or nature or anything that they like here, just to try and give me some ideas to think of the branding. And actually that came back with actually a lot more around what they'd like to focus on and to talk about, which was that some of them have lived or have a deep relationship with forests, leaves, birds, sparrows. So that actually started more of a conversation than this kind of big visual list that I'd made. So we came up with lots of different themes, which I'll take you through. But these are the resources that we put in for the grant, which meant that they could create at home. I think they could only be creative when they went to the studio, and all their resources were kept there. So these were for them to take home, and for staff that got involved as well. So our first session was human wildlife coexistence and sketching in the zoo and of our artifacts. So we started every session with the maps. On the left, we had a map of the world, the UK and London, where we're from, if we wanted to say that. And it was a really nice grounding technique that we used then every session. It was a way to welcome new people and also put everyone on a kind of equal playing field to start. And we said our relationship to the topic. That came out, the relationship to the topic bit, when reflecting that a few of the researchers like, we don't actually know what their background on the topic was and at what level to pitch explaining. So we started to say what our relationship to the topic was. One of the members back in Iran is an environmental scientist by background, so it's good to just get a grounding of what people's understanding is. So yeah, so this was wildlife crime, so that's where a lot of our artifacts are from, and at ZSL is they're donated by Border Force and Seizures. So this was a really interesting one where I think a few of the members struggled with where they were from, and when language barrier comes into it, the kind of question was like, why are they dead? Why are they here? This is very upsetting. And so that was very helpful for Lou and Alex, who spoke to you yesterday, to kind of start really getting down to basics of why we have them, what we do with them. And it was a really good understanding of our understanding of their understanding to grow the project on for further sessions. The next one was cyanotyping. I'm going to whip through these next ones, but cyanotyping is a light sensitive paper, and you hold things over it. Where the light hits it, it turns blue, and where it doesn't hit it, it turns white. And this was quite a mindful session where we could go out and find different shapes of leaves, or here you can see from our collections, we've got quills and feathers and shells of some form, which Lou and Alex will tell you more about. The next one was printing. So here in our ZSL library archives, we have a very huge catalogue of artworks and prints. And so Anne, our librarian, shared the different printing techniques. So we had a primary source from that area. Then we went and looked at, went around the zoo and had a look at different animals there. And then Mehmet, who's one of the members of the new art studio, was an artist and a political cartoonist, and that's the reason why he's here, is he was sentenced for his cartoons, and is now here with us. And so he led the session on printing, and Hassan translated for him, and that was the first beginning step towards us doing kind of mutual exchange and kind of doing that real power sharing, power balance, kind of resetting it from us just talking about our research and showing our stuff. They started to show theirs. You can see he brought his work, and really enthusiastic, and so we put them all on chairs, and that was a really nice setup that we started to use going forward, is that they quite informally put their work up, and then they could tell us about their work, and we'd switch around in the order. So yes, that's that one. This one, we talked about migration. I've just realised I didn't tell you the topics of those sessions. We talked about migration in this one, where we did black and white ink, and it's no surprise that they'd want to understand why other animals might migrate or why they experience water migration. And we went and saw why the zebras migrate, and we saw the zebras at the zoo. Not as many pictures with this one, but life in water, and we did watercolouring. And so then we then had an exhibition at the end, and so I'm going to quickly go through. This was the exhibition that we had just in January, where we got all of the artwork up created, gave them a bit more time, and I think for them it was very powerful to have themselves recognised. That was some feedback that we had, that this is kind of the first time that they've been able to create something, show something that a lot of them can't and not allowed to work at the moment. So to have an output and have it recognised was very powerful. And so we had all of our specimens that we've used in the project alongside. The women from Iran wanted a specific section just to demonstrate why their opinions about Iran. And so we facilitated that with their work. So just here are some pictures of what it looked like. And so this is the impact, is mainly that it was well-being, improved well-being, both for staff and for the new art studio members, connectedness to the work that we do. Impact on staff, I think it changed and had quite a powerful impact on what people view as public engagement and what people can do in the organisation. A lot more people have been involved or signed up to the public engagement that I do, and I'd like to think it's as a benefit of having been involved. And then anecdotal, again, we just had really great feedback from it, and people just want to keep it going. And in respect to what someone said earlier about sustainability of programming, when you have this like set funded project, we also tried and we printed prints and tried to sell them during the exhibition, so we could start to generate our own income stream for it, so that we could then just cover, the main thing is food and transport. Those are the main barriers, and those are the main things we need to think about covering. These are quotes, read one if you want, but they're just nice. And reflections, when you're working with people who have lived experience of trauma, there's kind of this trauma-informed practice, which was the first insight for me. But when people are very full of their own emotions, they can't necessarily have time to think about other people's. That didn't come up that much, and I think I saw a side that most of the researchers didn't necessarily see. Very small, but it can come up, so just to consider that. Language barrier, Google Translate was actually really good. We used it a lot more than we thought we would, and we checked it, and it was a little bit clunky, but everyone understood it and used the translations a lot. Consider paying people for their time if it's going to be covered anyway, and yeah, consider needs. Those are the main things. I want to say thank you so much to everyone that supported at ZSL, the new Art Studio, Zaya, UKRI, Alex and Lou, a shout out, and Linda and Ellie, and just a big thank you to everyone involved. And then lastly, thank you to organisers of NatSCA conference. I just know that organising a conference, you just don't see, if it all goes smoothly, it means there's been a lot of work going on in the background. So thank you very much. Thanks. Any questions? Yeah.
I was wondering, you mentioned there was a language barrier. So how involved were the arts group with the exhibition making, and were you planning on doing a multilingual exhibition as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question for people online was, you mentioned there's a language barrier. How involved were the members with the development of the exhibition, and did you consider doing a multi-language exhibition? So good question. Multiple ways I'm going to answer that. First is that sometimes we liaised with the new Art Studio directors who are almost their therapists, or have an intimate understanding of their needs. Doing co-production is very resource intensive, and trying to get hold of them all the time, ask them small things, sometimes was not a very efficient way of doing something when the new Art Studio directors could speak for what they would need. Or what happened is they would go to the studio, they meet every Monday, and then have a set of questions that I'd sent around, like, how do I want to do it? I want to do it like this. That was kind of how sometimes the co-production worked. We had 4 weeks to put the exhibition together, so it would be really exciting to do something like that. I went to the new Art Studio to say, what would we like as a celebration event? And actually, the lesson through all of this is that you saw by session 3 we were doing kind of mutual sharing, but it took at least 3 sessions for it to, even for me to explain to you without images, without it properly being conceptualized, what a co-production project for equitable engagement looks like. I struggle to conceptualize that. So when you're in a new country, don't necessarily understand everything very well, that's like kind of almost off the table, and it's more of just like a doing thing. And then in an ideal world, you do like 5 things. It's like, which bits of those would we like to do? So kind of explain through doing. So when I went and I was like, what would you like to do? Like, how can we celebrate? The first thing they said was like, keep doing it. And I was like, great. That's not what NERC want for the co-celebration event. And then I was like, anything else? How would you like to celebrate? What would you like to do? And they were like, have ice cream. And I was like, independently, multiple people said ice cream. And I was like, that's also really nice, but also isn't quite what I think we wanted. And then Mehmet, who has a background in arts, was like, yeah, big public exhibition, invite the BBC, invite I was like, right, okay, we can do that. So we did do translations of all the interpretation. We use Google Translate, but people who came, who read them, so we did all the languages of the members, which was about 8. So we did do that. So yes, we did think about it, and it was a very short space of time, so we did what we could. Great, thank you.
One very quick question before we move on to the next speaker is, does your work live on digitally?
Does it live on digitally? Yes, it does. It will. So we closed it up in February. I'm still kind of bringing it to a close for this phase. We are wanting to, as we all have been saying, kind of want to continue everything and all of these relationships. It's not fair to engage heavily with the group and then just move on. So the project is continuing and our relationship with them, and I hope to have it all online at some point in the next year. Yes, thank you. Anything else?